It is now time for Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. And now, here he is, the man who exposes every closeted Nickelback fan in the world, Bill Chase! Thank you, Mr. Podcast Announcer, and welcome to another edition of Diary of a Wrestling Fan, the podcast that chronicles my 33 amazing years of being a fan of professional wrestling. Thank you for listening on Spotify, on Anchor, wherever podcasters stream. Follow, subscribe, do what you gotta do, and wherever you're streaming from. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, hit like, hit notifications, and hit subscribe right now. Well, folks, we got another good show for you today. We're going to be reminiscing about Survivor Series 1993. All right, interesting time for wrestling, for the WWF as a whole. I was about 10 years old. I was 10 years old, going on 11 when this show took place. But before we get to that, I'm going to give a quick plug, of course, to Pro Wrestling Ontario. Follow us on Twitter, on Instagram. Give us a like on Facebook. And if you happen to be listening to this podcast on YouTube, scroll over the top corner of the video. There'll be a link to Pro Wrestling Ontario's YouTube channel. Hit it, go there, visit, click like, notifications, click subscribe, but do that after you listen to the podcast. We got the Backstage Shenanigans of Foundation. We got promos, we got matches, we got complete shows, both Iron Cup tournaments. And folks, I am glad to announce that there might be a little something on the way in the works. So stay tuned to our social media to find out. That's Pro Wrestling Ontario. All right, let's get down to it. Thank you all for those who listened to the episode last week about the wedding of Test and Stephanie McMahon. What a show that was to look back on. But today we're going a little back further. I guess I was 10 years old, going to November of 1993. That's right, Survivor Series 1993, the Thanksgiving tradition. I figure it's only fitting since I'm recording this well, just after, I guess you say, because it's past midnight now, but just after American Thanksgiving has it. Happy Thanksgiving to my American listeners. Also, I want to say, I hope you guys are staying safe. You know, I'm not going to lecture you about what to do, but I'm just going to say, I hope you're staying safe, and I hope you have a healthy holiday season coming up as well. So, keep at it. All right. Well, Survivor Series 1993. So, okay. So here I am. I'm 10 years old at this point, and I'm in just started grade 5, which I had a great teacher. I had some good friends in that class. My longtime childhood friend, Tim Henriksen, was thankfully in my class the first time in 4 years. We had stayed friends, kind of, but we hadn't been in the same class together for a long time. And then we were the outcasts of the class. We got picked on a lot. But at the same time, though, we also had a few friends. I mentioned on previous podcasts, my friend Sandra. She was a big wrestling fan at this time as well. I always like to talk wrestling with her. And it was a polarizing time for the WWF in 1993. They were really painted into a corner going into the summer. They had just lost Hulk Hogan. Hogan was done. He wouldn't be back for another 9 years. And you'd think they want to hedge their bets on the guy they tried to hedge their bets with and take a risk with in the first place, being Bret the Hitman Hart. Now, look, we can go on and on about what lack of a draw Bret was, whatever, from the so-called experts out there. But at the same time, though, fans got behind Bret. You know, the fan base may have been minuscule, but Bret was their guy. And there was no question of Bret's following overseas, especially. Of course, he had a big following here in Canada as well. And I just don't think he was given a fair chance at first. He would get a much more fair chance later on, obviously. But I don't think he was given a fully fair chance. To me, he is clear-cut the number one babyface at this point. Now, of course, this is when the Lex Express, led by the recreation of Hulk Hogan that Vince McMahon tried so hard to replicate in Lex Luger. I'm sure a lot of you listeners know who Lex is, but for those who may not, Lex, of course, was a star in WCW for many years. He came over to the WWF, or I should say the WBF, the World Bodybuilding Federation, owned by Vince McMahon in 1992. But that, of course, shut down, and Lex was signed to be a wrestler. He played a character called the Narcissist, which I thought he played really well because it kind of suited. You just picture Lex actually being like that. But to be fair, when they turned it, they built up the angle, of course, where Yoko couldn't be body slammed by Hogan, so if Hogan couldn't do it, who's going to do it? Lex was the one who did it. That body slam challenge on the USS Intrepid. It was a memorable moment. So they were going full throttle with Lex, hyping him up on TV. Some people bought it, some people didn't. I, for one, liked Lex. I wasn't into him as much as I was into Brett. But at the same time, though, Lex was okay. Like, I used to like him in WCW, but I didn't really care for him too. Like, I cared for him, but not as much to the point where I would say even a Hogan. And I'll say this, Lex, in my opinion, looking back on this, was committed to the role. He was absolutely committed to the role. But I just felt that, even at the age of 10, I felt that he's not Hogan. He's not Brett. To me, he was lacking something that two major names had. You look back on it now, you can see why a lot of people thought it was very contrived. A lot of people thought it was very ridiculous. But then to give us credit, they went full. Again, some say that was their fault there. I don't. If you're building a new babyface for a guy who's been a heel pretty much his entire run there so far, Lex had been there for about 6 months as a wrestler at that point, then you got to really hype him up. They needed a big challenge for Yokozuna at SummerSlam. Brett was in a feud with Jerry the King Lawler, which was excellent, which I'll get to. But Lex, they needed, our top babyface, and with Brett, their other top babyface, in another feud, Hogan gone, there was really not a lot of choices to make. You could have gone with The Undertaker, but again, that was coming down the road, and again, I'll get to that. So, really, there wasn't many choices to be made, and they tried their best with Lex. And here's the thing, they didn't even do a terrible job with hyping Lex. By the time, he hadn't really wrestled in that the Lex Express tour. But he's making appearances at shows. He's making appearances, wherever. And he was all over television. But SummerSlam came. That ending was one of the most lame endings ever to a main event match. Even though the match itself, I think, is a sleeper. I think the match between Lex and Yoko at SummerSlam 1993 was good. But Lex celebrating that count-out victory with the balloon, the red, white, and blue balloons coming down. And the stipulation was Lex only gets one shot. Now, here's the thing. And again, I know people get annoyed at playing fantasy booker, but hear me out. And I don't even doubt that people who are, experts in this field probably might feel the same way. That Lex, if he's going to win by count-out, they want to keep this thing going to WrestleMania, which, again, I understand Vince's logic there. But they could have done something where Lex knocks Yoko out, and he struggles. Of course, Yoko being over 550 pounds. That's what he was billed as, mind you. I think he was a bit more. But Lex trying to lift Yoko, but he can't. And so the referee gets denied. So Lex still jumps in the ring so he can at least get the win. And he shouldn't be he's gets his arm raised. He's kind of like maybe shaking his head, like this was my only shot. I think that sympathy would have been built on him. He could have even gone on TV saying, some people say it might be lame, but I don't know. You get on TV and said, I dropped the ball. I feel I let my country down, stuff like that. I think he would have garnered sympathy. Because again, the reaction for Lex at SummerSlam was huge. It was huge. He was really over with that live crowd in Auburn Hills. So they did something right. Problem was they treated it like a big victory. Now, keep in mind, Lex did cut a promo on TV how down he was about not being able to win the title, but at the same time, though, people just remember that ridiculous celebration. And Lex, at this point by Survivor Series time, wasn't losing much momentum. He actually had a fair bit of it going into Survivor Series still, because I think people still cared about his quest. The problem was that he was in a feud with Ludvig Borga. Now, the Ludvig Borga character is actually one of those, cult following kind of characters where, people talk about it a lot today, but it's just like the way he came up with those vignettes making fun of how bad America looks, like going to like some dingy areas. He came off as just some angry environmentalist. Like, here's Ludvig Borga, the angry environmentalist from Finland. I don't know. That's strange. Borga, Tony Halme was his real name. He tried. He tried with that character. And so much to the point that they were building, him and Lex did the house show run in the fall of 93. And they actually had Borga and Tatanka's undefeated streak. Okay, so when the main event was announced for Survivor Series, it was the All-Americans versus the Foreign Fanatics. On the Foreign Fanatics, you had Yokozuna leading the team with Borga, and the Quebecers, Jacques Rougeau, and the man we know today as PCO, but back then known as Pierre simply. And on the All-Americans with Lex, it was Lex, Tatanka, and the Steiner brothers. So, that works because, and again, that's a good team to call the All-Americans. So, because let's face it, Lex, of course, with the character, Tatanka being a proud Native American, and the Steiners, they're just pretty much your all-American, good old boys. And they were literally, all-Americans in college. University of Michigan, I should say university, not college. But you know what I mean. So anyway, they hyping up that match pretty good. They had Borga and Tatanka's undefeated streak. Tatanka had been undefeated in nearly 2 years at this point. Now, I'm not saying Tatanka's undefeated streak was on the level of Goldberg's or Taker's WrestleMania streak, but Tatanka still mattered in the eyes of fans. He was over with crowds. They liked him. He had a lot of support. And that undefeated streak really kept him, I guess you could say, that kept a certain aura around him that made him special. Now, even in again, it's not an insult on Tatanka. He's got a lot of other things these days you can insult him about, but I digress. So back then, when Tatanka's streak was going, as someone who it was so hyped up on TV that someone who had to end it should be special. It should be someone good going forward, getting something big out of it. Borga got it, and spoiler alert, Borga was gone by the new year. He got hurt and was officially released, I believe, by later that spring or early summer, 94. Borga was off TV by January of 94 because of an injury. He was supposed to be at WrestleMania 10. Again, still didn't make it. So, yeah. And in hindsight, I understand what they're trying to do at the time. They're going to make Borga like a top-level guy, but it seems like Tatanka's undefeated streak was wasted. And granted, that is what Borga at least is known for. He's known for ending Tatanka's streak. So, he has that legacy, I guess. And sadly, however, he has passed away. So we're going to the match, of course. Now, the same day on Superstars where Borga ended the streak, Yokozuna came out and Banzai dropped Tatanka right on his side. So that took him out of the match. Then Lex took Pierre out of the match by knocking out that steel-plated forearm. So the All-Americans decided that The Undertaker was going to be their partner, which, again, it was great because Taker was, again, a top babyface. He hadn't had a match yet on that card. And I actually wondered that week before they announced him, I said, why doesn't The Undertaker have a match on this show? And lo and behold, there he is. So I'm just thinking they never ended up making him one of the 4 DOINKS. So, of course, that was a major issue. Then Crush, who just turned heel a couple weeks prior, took Pierre's place. Crush, not a foreigner at all, but again, with his heel turn as allegiance with Mr. Fuji, as I guess kind of a Japanese sympathizer, which some say that's what he was. I didn't really get that vibe from him at all, just because Fuji was his manager. But anyway, either way, it still at least made sense in some way. So he had a feud going with Macho Man at the time. That's who he had turned on because their friendship was quite present on TV. It was always referenced by Macho on commentary. And apparently they were close in real life. So that was the big issue going into Survivor Series. The other big issue was Bret Hart and Jerry Lawler. Bret Hart and Jerry Lawler had a really personal feud happening where it started when, of course, Lawler attacked Bret at King of the Ring. And then in SummerSlam, they had that epic segment where Lawler tries to hire Doink to fix the injury, hires Doink. It ends up being a ruse, and Lawler's forced to wrestle, and Bret beats the piss out of him and gets disqualified in doing so. But he still injures him, so I guess it's his measure of revenge. Lawler is, of course, insulting the Hart family. He harassed Stu and Helen in the crowd while Bret was wrestling. Lawler had a live mic while doing it. Some great stuff. Great stuff. And so that was the big issue. It was Bret Owen and his two brothers Keith and Bruce coming out of retirement taking on Jerry Lawler and his Knights, his Mystery Knights. I was really looking forward to that because I was really passionate about this because I hated Lawler with a passion. I remember even in school, me and Sandra would go on, Sandra and I, would go on about how much we hated Lawler. Now, even I knew a little bit about Lawler's Memphis background because, again, the After Mags. But yeah, it was, again, we were like ready for Bret to kick his ass once and for all. Now, I think this was supposed to be the payoff of the feud, at least this part of the feud. I know they'd renew it later, but still. So that was the big issue going in to Survivor Series. Again, I was really hyped up about that. Bret, despite not being the champion, had a great feud going. And then Lawler sadly got into some legal issues. He was accused of sexually assaulting an underage girl. Yikes. Lawler, however, was later acquitted of all charges. But at that point, of course, he had to be taken off television. And so they inserted Shawn Michaels, who was just coming off a suspension of a apparent failed drug test and had just vacated the Intercontinental title. But of course, Shawn still had his title, which they never took away from him. Razor Ramon became the new champion. So that feud was about to kick off in a big way. So it was Shawn Michaels, who had a history with Bret. They faced each other the year prior at Survivor Series, but they didn't really talk about that all that much. Kind of strange. And they tried their best to make it like Shawn was making fun of Bret's family now. I understand they were painted in a corner. They did what they had to do, I suppose. But yeah, I don't think that was going to be a winner either way. So, but I'll get to that. So the things about this show just changing left and right. And then, of course, you had the 4 Doinks coming up against Bam Bam Bigelow, Bastion Booger, and the Headstringers. Now, Doink had turned babyface, which was sad because Matt Bourne was really doing well as heel Doink, I thought. Bourne was about on his way out of the company at this point, so the Doink character just got weaker after this. I will say this about early babyface Doink. At least Bourne was still, trying to make it work. And it was actually to a point, I'd say. I mean, Doink was liked by kids and that, and but still, Doink still had that not a devious side, but a sneaky, prankster side to him, which people still enjoyed, I guess. So there you have it. Bourne was still playing babyface Doink well. Again, not nearly as great as heel Doink. So, and of course, there's that mystery. There's always another Doink hiding under the ring, stuff like that. So the 4 Doinks was going to happen. I was actually kind of curious to see how that was going to play out. And then, of course, there was the upper echelon of the mid card, if you will, with Razor Ramon, the Intercontinental Champion, who just turned babyface. I loved Razor as a babyface. Razor Ramon, Mr. Perfect, 1, 2, 3 Kingdom, Marty Jannetty against IRS, Diesel, Kevin Nash, who just started his singles push at this point. Rick Martel and Adam Bomb. So solid talent all around on this show. So now on to the show itself. So again, I'm 10 years old here. I'm looking forward to it because I want to see. I'm looking forward. And I'm looking forward to see in the main event Undertaker getting his hands on Yokozuna because they had hyped their house show program on TV. Taker interrupted Yoko during an interview, setting that program off. So I was psyched about that confrontation. Sadly, the Bret Lawler match with their teams I was looking forward to just lost its luster for me. So the show opened, and the heel team, I call it the Intercontinental Division match. IRS, Diesel, Martel, and Adam Bomb came out. Now, these guys, IRS, I thought it was a great character. Taxman, everybody hates the Taxman. Diesel, to me at this time, Nash was nothing special at all, just another big guy. I didn't really care for him one way or the other at this point. And Adam Bomb was, okay, whatever. Rick Martel, again, they were just a solid team. So I noticed Razor, the Kid, and Marty Jannetty come out. And I love all three of these guys. Razor had just turned babyface because his character was just so cool that fans started gravitating towards him despite starting out as a heel. The guy was money. The guy was money from the get-go. So it was no wonder fans started gravitating towards him, and no wonder they had to turn him babyface. But he didn't change much. He didn't change his character. He just started feeding with heels. That's really all it was. So Mr. Perfect was supposed to be their partner, Kurt Hennig. He was supposed to be their partner, but I noticed on Superstars a week or so prior to this, that there was a brawl between these two teams, and Mr. Perfect wasn't there. Matter of fact, I hadn't seen Perfect on TV since October. We're already deep into November here. We're towards the end of November. So I'm thinking, okay, well, because I thought when that happened, I'm like, it's strange how Mr. Perfect's not there. So, of course, Razor comes out, because Razor's the captain. Usually the captain comes out last, but there's no Mr. Perfect. So he says Perfecto had to tag out the last minute, and out came the Macho Man. And, of course, it's in Boston. It's in Boston Garden. The place goes nuts. It's Boston. Macho's a god in the Northeast, wherever he goes. He's a god everywhere. He was a god everywhere he went. But regardless, Northeast be the WWS main territory, obviously. I mean, he's going to get an insane reaction there, and he did. And whenever he was in the ring in this match, my goodness, the crowd was right into it. Which is sad because he eliminates Diesel, which is kind of strange because they were pushing Diesel a lot as a really, powerful big man, formerly Shawn Michaels' bodyguard. He hits the elbow drop on him, pins him, eliminates him, but then Crush, again, who he's feuding with, comes out, which again is a given, I guess, and distracts Macho long enough to get rolled up by IRS, and he's eliminated. And that pisses the crowd off. The crowd died a little bit, actually. Of course, Macho chases Crush into the backstage area, and he's there for you going, I actually like the Macho Crush feud. It made sense from a storytelling standpoint. Crush and Macho were supposed to be good friends. Macho waited too long to Crush thought Macho waited too long to rescue him from those 4 bonsai drops he took from Yokozuna that injured him. And he said he never called him or visited him in the hospital, stuff like that. They had a confrontation on Raw where they looked like they solved their problems, then Crush viciously attacked him. It made logical sense. Crush may be the heel here, but we understand at least why he reacted the way he did. But Macho also had his reasons for the way he responded as well. So that issue's still going. I'm one of the few who enjoy that feud. Maybe the payoff itself wasn't great at WrestleMania 10, but at least it was an interesting, intriguing feud that had a good story to it. So, people can say they want about WWF in 1993. Now, again, business is down here. They're not doing overly well. But at the same time, though, they're striking gold with certain things here and there. That's the thing about these quote-unquote dead eras or dark eras, that they do have little nuggets of gold. So anyway, this match here is actually really good. This is probably, spoiler, it was the match of the night. This was a fun match, especially when it got down to, because Razor eliminated IRS, and IRS came back and hit Razor in the torso with this briefcase, causing him to be counted out. So that was kicking off their feud going into the Royal Rumble. So it's down to 2-on-2. It was Marty and the Kid against Rick Martel and Adam Bomb. Great ending there. Great ending sequence with them both getting surprising roll-up wins. Sunset flip to end it. And it was just, again, it was really good. Jannetty and Kid really had the chemistry of an underdog team, and they went with that. They actually went with that to keep those two teaming up. So I really enjoyed that match. I thought it was a lot of fun. Again, there's strong talent there in the Intercontinental division. And Razor was really catching fire. It was nice. Macho Man was a nice surprise addition at the last minute. So, yeah, I thought that was fun. And I was watching that, and I was really excited watching Jannetty and the Kid because, again, the underdog, the guys who are not, tough, that are smaller. That's what I felt like sometimes. I felt like the guy who was, always the underdog in anything as a kid. So I really enjoyed that. So then the match with Brett and his brothers taking on Michaels and the Knights. So the Knights were Greg Valentine and Barry Horowitz under hoods, and a wrestler by the name of Jeff Gaylord, who was also under a hood. The initial thing was going to be that they're going to unmask Knights and reveal who they were. At least that's what I heard anyway. That's the rumor. And I suppose that's just they decided to go through with that. But I mean, it's the Boston crowd. They're going to know who Greg Valentine is, even if some younger fans might not. But mind you, Valentine had only been gone about a couple of years at this point, barely actually. He left in early '92, went to WCW, so he was around. You know what I mean? People in Boston are going to remember Greg Valentine. They're going to know who Barry Horowitz is too, but that one might not be as shocking or anything like that. But I guess they thought, the rumor is they thought of a lot of people like Jimmy Snuka, which would have been pretty cool. Again, Boston fans don't know who he is. And again, Snuka hadn't been gone that long either. In the grand scheme of things, he maybe been gone. He actually just made an appearance on Raw not long before this in the Intercontinental Title Battle Royal. So Snuka was kind of hanging around at this point. But anyway, so I'm not interested in this at all. And as much as I love Brett, just the whole luster of it. And even at my age thing, I'm thinking, no, I want to see him beat up Lawler. Now, I didn't know about Lawler's legal issues until I read about it in the Toronto Sun. Because again, my dad would buy sometimes. I'd sometimes read that wrestling dirt sheet kind of article, and they mentioned that about Lawler. And I asked him, because I asked my dad knew what happened to Jerry Lawler, and my dad said Lawler did a bad thing. That's all he said. Obviously, being 10 years old, my dad didn't want to really explain it to me. I get that, believe me. And however, that copy of the Toronto Sun was in the washroom. I was looking at it, read it, and found out that's what happened. Pretty much, it was shortly after the show I found out that's what happened. So anyway, I'm kind of humming and hawing during the match. Now, Ray Combs of Family Feud, the late Ray Combs, the former host of Family Feud, was his life ever tragic? Poor guy. I liked Ray Combs. I might have been in the minority there, but some call him the worst Family Feud host, and maybe out of most of them, he might be. I don't know. That might tend to like go to Louis Anderson, and I like Louis Anderson. Don't get me wrong. I actually like Louis Anderson, but he just wasn't made for hosting Family Feud, I thought. Because again, Ray Combs had the unenviable task of filling the shoes of Richard Dawson, who made that show famous years prior, and he just never was able to do it. I thought he was great at WrestleMania 8 when he ring-announced the 8-man tag. But no, Ray Combs had a loose association with wrestling. The wrestlers had been on Family Feud a few times. So he knew about them. You could tell there were some things he didn't know. I don't know if he was a religious fan or not, but it seemed as though he knew a fair little bit of an amount. Like, he might not know some of the moves or anything like that, but he was familiar with who a lot of these guys were. Like, obviously, Brett and Shawn. Didn't know much about the others, but again, why would he? Owen, if he's just a casual fan, Owen's no disrespect to Owen. Owen's pretty low on the totem pole at this point. Oh, that was going to change mere minutes later. But Owen was, again, he was in the low part of the mid card, I'd say. Yeah. And Bruce and Keith had just come out of retirement, and nobody in the WWF really knew who they were. So this match, now again, I'm still paying attention now. I should mention as well that my parents at this point, again, they usually go to a movie when I watch these shows. They did that night too. So of course I'm doing my thing. I'm doing the same thing I did the Survivor Series the year prior. I'm like wrestling around, mimicking moves, and having my own matches against my couch cushions, and just having a grand old time. You know what I mean? And that's what I was doing most of this match. And I was pretending I was Bret Hart beating up Lawler. So as I did that, as I'm kind of watching this match go on, Hearts are dominating. Nothing's really happening here that interests me. John, but then I catch my attention, however, and I turned my head at the right time. Owen was in the ring. He collided with Brett. Brett went right into the guardrail. Owen got rolled up. Owen threw a temper tantrum. And I'm like, oh, what's up with Owen here? Like, oh, he seems actually really upset. And keep in mind, Owen's the smiley white meat babyface. That's all I know him as at this point. And they have the thing with the Hart family's in the crowd. Again, this would have worked better with Lawler, obviously. But okay, so I watched this match again recently. I know how a lot of veteran wrestlers criticize a lot of today's younger talent for quote unquote trying to get their shit in. Sometimes it's valid, sometimes I just say, oh, whatever. But by God, Bruce was trying to get his shit in. Bruce loves the spotlight. And I'll say this right here, right now. Bruce Hart has some great stuff happening in Stampede Wrestling during his time, but I can't stand him. I honestly cannot stand Bruce Hart. There's just something about him that's really grating. I read his book. He's a freaking name dropper. He blames Bret for everything that went wrong. And I'll say this even too, to be unbiased, he made some valid points. I wouldn't doubt that Bret didn't want him anywhere around him and stuff like that. I don't doubt that Bret probably put the kibosh on well, it's the fact that Bret put the kibosh on a lot of things Bruce wanted to do. Apparently the Bret Owen feud, spoiler ahead, was supposed to be Bruce and Bret. Why should we care? It would make more sense with Owen. At least the fans knew who Owen was. Yeah, like I said, he was lower on the totem pole, but they still knew who he was. He'd been on TV for the better part of nearly 2 years at this point. So no, I just don't know. Like even Bruce's book, like the back cover, I think, had a picture of him and Vince McMahon arm in arm. Like, come on, that's ultimate. That's like the. Just Bruce is really grating it. He insults his brother all the time. And again, I don't doubt him and Bret, again, being real life brothers, I don't doubt that him and Bret had their reasons for their heat. I don't doubt even Bruce might have his reasons for not liking Bret all that much. But at the same time, though, he just seems to piss and moan about Bret's success more than anything. And he still wears Bret's shit when he's doing these interviews. Figure that out. But anyway, I digress. Sorry, I don't. Yeah, Bruce just bothers me. But yeah, so and again, I've watched some of Bruce's stuff in Stampede. He was good. He was good. He wasn't a half bad booker either. His stuff that he booked was good. So Bruce has a mind for wrestling. Clearly, I'm not disputing that. But man alive. So anyway, Michaels a few minutes later ultimately walks away. He's just taking too much of a beating from the Hart brothers. Owen comes back out, and I'm thinking, okay, he's coming back out to celebrate. And then the moment he yanks Bret down off the second rope, like, whoa. I'm like, what is this? And then they get into like a minor, like not even a shoving match, but just like a small little tussle, if you will. Like a little. And Owen is trying to be calmed down. Helen Hart, God bless her, is doing her best to act upset. Some shots you believe it, other shots, yeah. But I mean, again, she's not a wrestler, performer, so that way. But I thought the thing she did prior to Bret and Bulldog's match, that little interview they taped with her, was good. So Helen has shown genuine emotion in the past. I guess maybe just the camera caught her at the wrong time. I don't know. But either way, at least the point got across. And there were some good shots of her being upset. And just some other ones she looked like she was still smiling. But anyway, so Stu's trying to calm the situation down as well. Stu was in their corner. Stu actually hit a nice punch on Sean. Stu's pushing 80 here and could still throw a pretty good punch. Stu was actually known for throwing really good punches. So there you go. I guess it's some things you never lose no matter how old you get. But either way, and that's the thing for a guy who is as old as he does, long before you hear the stories about him. You hear the few stories that Bret had mentioned on WWF TV, but the full extent of what Stu was about, I didn't really know until like Wrestling with Shadows, really. And of course, the diehard wrestling fans who hasn't tried to do, well, Stu Hart impersonation there. Maybe I might take you down the dungeon, show you a move or two, yeah. It's not like more like Cartman impersonating Stu Hart. But anyway, so and then for the match that I wasn't interested in, I'm looking right now, and I'm thinking, Owen's such a crybaby. What's his problem? And then Owen, he brushes off Pettengill. Top Pettengill tries to interview him. And that was, I'm like, okay, we got something going here. And that was one of the first things I told my dad when he got home, because he was still kind of watching at this point. And I told him what Owen did. And that was actually one of the things I remembered the most about this show. I remember going to school the next day talking to Sandra about it, saying how, Owen threw this like little temper tantrum. So it was etched in our minds. Where they were going with this, I had no idea, obviously, but still, it had my attention. had a lot of fans' attention. So then came the Rock and Roll Express and the Heavenly Bodies. Now, I knew very little about the Rock and Roll Express. I remember Morton, especially from WCW, as a heel. By the time I started watching WCW, because they aired on TSN sometimes late night on CTV, Morton was actually a heel. Him and Robert had already had their split up. Again, I knew a bit about them because of the magazines. I didn't know a lot. Had seen barely anything of their work. Knew nothing about how great these guys truly are. So this is a cross-promotional thing for Smoky Mountain. This is for the Smoky Mountain Wrestling Tag Team titles. Of course, the tag team feud was the Heavenly Bodies, the heels, and the Rock and Roll Express. The Heavenly Bodies, and I will say this about the Heavenly Bodies, I love them in Smoky Mountain, especially Jimmy Del Rey. Oh my god, just his mannerisms. The Gigolo dance. And that smile with the tooth. Oh man, just such good stuff. And it's funny because, okay, so there's the video podcast out there called the Old School Wrestling Review, run by a bunch of lads from the UK area. I believe they are from Ireland. So they say, is this Heavenly Bodies thing a rib? Because they're both ugly as sin. I'm like, yes, guys, you understand the gimmick. Congratulations. That was what it was. They were both not exactly good-looking guys at all. Their bodies were anything but heavenly, even in the eyes of the most jaded woman. But that was what made it so good. These guys acting like pretty boys. It was easy heat for them in Smoky Mountain. Problem was, it's a Boston crowd. And again, as great as Smoky Mountain Wrestling is, or was, they don't care. Which, strange thing, even though normally when it's guys I don't know very well, like I knew the Heavenly Bodies because they had that match with the Signers and that at SummerSlam, and they've been on TV quite a bit. Rock and Roll had a few appearances, not too many. But I actually found myself enjoying this. Which is strange, because again, I'm only 10 years old. I'm not a guy who, quote unquote, rates matches by stars. I'm just a kid who enjoys what I enjoy, and if I don't enjoy it, I don't enjoy it. But I found myself actually watching this more than the match with Brett again. And Brett's my favorite wrestler. Watching him again, just because the whole story of Lawler was out the window. So that's why I didn't care. But I'm like, okay, I actually am enjoying this. And I got pissed off when they won with the Cornette's tennis racket. And I love Jim Cornette. I love to hate him. Love to hate him. He was so fantastic at making it just want to wring his neck. And that's something that I liked about Cornette. I thought I could take him. I thought I could take him. That was the beauty of hating Cornette. I'm like, I could take this guy. I could beat him up. It was great. So no, I actually found myself, and it was a really good match. So yeah, I thought I was into it. I'm like, okay, even though the crowd wasn't, but then of course Rock and Roll Express was gone. I guess that part of that deal was over. The body stuck around. They actually stuck around for another couple of years, and Tom Pritchard ended up working for the company for many years. So then we get to the four Doinks versus Bam Bam, Bash and Booger, and the Head Shrinkers. Now again, I didn't mind Babyface Doink at this point. I just thought it was weird because I despised him and enjoyed watching him more as a bad guy, a heel. And what did we get? Bait and switch. We had Men on a Mission and the Bushwhackers dressed as Doinks against these guys in a pure comedy match. And I'll say this, yes, it's not a great match per se. I don't hate this as much as other people do. I can see why they hate it for sure. But it was harmless, really, in the grand scheme of things. It was, and the main event's coming. Now, some could argue you could have put that tag team match there, because again, the crowd didn't really care about it to kind of filter. But after the drama of what happened with Brett and Owen and the excitement of that opening match, I guess people needed to come down. And so they used the Rock and Roll Express match for that. And to be fair, again, there's nothing against the Rock and Roll Express or the Heavenly Bodies, but again, the Boston crowd couldn't care less. But Doink was still a character that people were very familiar with. Doink was one of the big highlights of 1993. I actually would be as far to say Doink what he's in the top 3 highlights of 1993. So anyway, this match again, it was most Survivor Series matches go 25 minutes to half an hour sometimes. This one only went like 10 maybe. It was short, it was comedic, it was silly, but there's been much worse. And at least they were committed to the material. The crowd did chant "We want Doinks," so they kind of the initial pop of Men on a Mission, the Bushwhackers being disguised as Doinks was pretty pretty good, but I guess that wore off real quick. But the crowd was still into some of the comedy. It wasn't like they were going nuts for anything like that. But again, it was not a bad buffer. Make the crowd laugh before they get serious again before the main event. And they did. Oh, sorry, I should digress back to. Sorry, I actually left something out I had in my notes here. I should not. I somehow, I guess, just overlooked it. During that match earlier with Brett and the Brett against Sean's team, Brett's team and Sean's team, Bobby Heenan, even though I hated him, of course he's a heel, but he was cracking me. Like again, even though I was like not fully paying attention, but I could hear some of the stuff he was saying, like, "Hey Stu, wake up!" I just heard Stu say, "Hey Helen, I'm damp." Heenan was ruthless, or Bruce, and this is a line I've repeated from Heenan many times. Bruce, what a stupid name. His parents had 9 months, and the best they can come up with is Bruce. Even though Lawler was the best at insulting the hearts, Heenan had his moments too. Heenan was an easy, close second place. So I thought that was great. Oh, and by the way, this is Bobby Heenan's last pay-per-view. Like the last full pay-per-view he would ever call for the WWF. Last time he'd appear for the WWF on pay-per-view until 2001. He was off to WCW. And they also teased the tension with him and Gorilla, which has been building up for years. We're talking years here. The better part of a near decade. So yeah. So something was happening there. So anyway, back to the Doinks match. So yeah, it was the Doinks one. It was a clean sweep. Then the actual Doink came on screen and taunted Bam Bam and Luna, and that feud was going to continue. Yeah, sadly, Matt Bourne, however, was gone, and I think Matt Bourne could have made it work better, even as a babyface. I think he's someone because Matt Bourne is a very grossly underrated performer. I watched his stuff in Portland, and my goodness, he was great. He was great. Like he does not get enough recognition for how good he really was. He was a big star in Portland. And I thought he played the Doink character to utter perfection. He had a so-so run in ECW, but sadly just never was able to reach that height again. And of course, so those who don't know, sadly, Matt Bourne passed away several years ago. So we're off to the main event. The All-Americans versus the Foreign Fanatics and Crush. So this had a good build, but I thinking, would Lex even get another title shot? And to be fair, Lex was still over with this Boston crowd. So when people say Lex lost his momentum right after SummerSlam, that's a lie. Lex was still getting great reactions. Lex was still getting great reactions up until the 94 Rumble, which I'll probably cover in the future. But that night, Brett was the guy they were clearly favoring. That was the thing. As over as Lex still was, I think Brett was just over in a lot more in many different markets, especially their most loyal markets. So that was the key. So Lex was getting a great, like I said, a great reaction here. The Undertaker, of course, people were into. The bloom was off the rose for the WWF with the Steiners at this point. I even noticed something was missing, like something seemed off about them since they lost their tag team titles. I know they didn't particularly enjoy having the job of the Quebecers. So yeah, this was what it was. So basically, in quick fashion, Rick Steiner got eliminated. And again, the crowd's really into this. And such again watching hindsight, and I as a kid, this is why their booking is so smart. As a kid, I'm like, when are Taker and Yoko gonna go at it? That's all I was waiting for. After Rick Steiner was eliminated, Crush, Macho got a measure of revenge by distracting Crush to get him counted out. Luger got rid of Jacques. Yoko got rid of, I think, Scott Steiner. And then Taker and Yoko finally got it. I'm like, yes! I stood up. And the crowd was losing their shit. Again, I'm 10 years old, and they're making me wait for something that they're making the fans wait for because they know it's going to be special. And it was. Yoko seemed somewhat unbeatable in many ways. Even though he had lost to Lex by countout, Lex will never pin him. That was in my mind too. Lex never pinned him. I thought Taker was the one guy who could take him out. And then, of course, that unforgettable spot where Yoko smashes Taker's face into the steps. Then he flips the hair, and the look on Yoko's face was great. That's amazing selling by Yoko. People think, the misconception, I learned this too from some of my mentors, that selling is not just taking a move. It's reactionary. Yoko's sell of Taker's Taker's no selling that the shot into the steps was great. Because Yoko never sold that kind of fear. It would look like it was the fear in his eyes. Like, oh my God, like nothing shocked Yoko. Yoko was very, very cold, very just focused. He had that poker face. Sometimes he'd look really angry, but otherwise, Yoko never showed that kind of emotion. That's what made that moment so special. And they were smart by replaying that on TV over and over for the next several weeks to build up to their match. It was beautiful. And then the bonsai drops. And that was dangerous, by the way. Taker sat up literally a split second in time, avoiding that bonsai drop. Because if he had to just even have been a 0.2 of a second late, Yoko was crushing his head. That could have been devastating. But no, thankfully they're both pros, and it worked out perfectly. Then it came down to Lex and Borga. I knew Lex was going to win, whatever, and it was over, and he did. And that was it. I'm like, I didn't enjoy that as much as the opening match. I enjoyed the Taker Yoko parts. Overall, I'm like, I remember my dad asked me, he's like, how'd you enjoy the show? I'm like, oh, it was all right. Wasn't great. And again, all I wanted to talk about really was Owen. But I did talk about Yoko and Taker as well. Yeah, I think they're heading that way for the Rumble. That's what my dad said. Yep, definitely going to happen at the Rumble. We were excited about that. And was happy when 1993 may not have been a year people look back upon fondly, and with good reason. Overall in wrestling, WCW wasn't doing much better at all at this point. Their pay-per-views were drawing really shitty numbers, and even WWF was drawing pretty shitty. But WCW, in hindsight, like compared to WCW and WWF at this point, compare this to WWF was drawing WrestleMania numbers compared to WCW's pay-per-views at this point. Yeah, it was just not good. So, because I'm one of the ones who enjoyed 1992 WCW, despite the fact that it might not have been a good year for them business-wise. WWF, again, Brett, Lawler, that stuff. But this is a show, if you look back, it's not looked back upon overly fondly. But at the same time, though, think about it. Mr. Perfect had to back out. That made a change. That match, at least that change was substituted well with the Macho Man, and that match ended up being good. Lawler being on killed that whole story. Killed it. I don't mean killed in the good way. It murdered it. Bottom line. But at least the post-match stuff with Brett Nolan was interesting. So again, they were still working with what they had. That tag team match was fun with this one tag team match. The four DOINKS stuff, again, inoffensive comedy, but nothing great. And the main event it felt like a main event. Even watching it later on, it still felt like a main event match. But once it came down to Lex and Borga, Taker Yoko helped make that match, and their segment wasn't even that long. It was maybe a couple minutes, if that. When they both got counted out, and it was a perfect way to hype up their match. They set up Taker and Yoko perfectly. Because I think Vince knew there was some mileage there. That was looking back at Survivor Series 1993. and what a show was for many reasons. 93 is very, again, one of those polarizing times for the company. They're trying hard with Lex, even though a lot of fans want to gravitate towards guys like Brett and Taker. So, yeah. Should mention, too, at this point that in 1993, there was a bit of that major culture shift into the alternative, if you will. Alternative rock music, bands like Nirvana hitting it big, and it's that whole movement of Smashing Pumpkins and Lollapalooza. There was, it was again like always called the alternative. Shows like Seinfeld, which wasn't your typical sitcom, hitting it big. Friends hadn't quite started yet, but Frasier had spin off of Cheers, which nobody thought would be successful, but it was. That wasn't exactly part of the alternative entertainment, but still, much music was changing. Their, type videos they were playing. And there wasn't a huge, the culture shift already began in like a year or two prior, but you see the alternative movements really starting to begin. People wanted to see something different. There was a large audience out there that wanted to see something different than what the major masses wanted to see at the time. Alternatives entertainment was loved by the masses. And I think that is why ECW, whether they're quote-unquote just an independent company, which, again, they were an independent company, but that's not a bad thing. I think that is why not long after this, they, a year or so later, that their cult following just kept growing. Even at this point, in 93, ECW had a following. So there you go. I mean, people are just looking for something a little different than the norm. And to be fair, no offense to Vince McMahon, because that's what he was familiar with, and that's what was his winning formula for many years. He was still going with the norm. Vince didn't grasp this until the major shift of the late 90s with more raunchier, risque entertainment. He may not have understood the alternative movement, but he definitely understood or at least maybe not understood, but Vince Russo, and I'll give Russo credit there, despite what I want to say about him, bro. But I'll give him credit that he did help Vince and a lot of the guys there understand what was going on in the world. To me, that's where Russo's biggest contribution is. I think that he helped, because Vince McMahon even admitted at times, and according to like people like Mick Foley, that he was not in touch with what was, relevant at that time. Russo, to his credit, was. So there you go. And help the usher in the Attitude Era. Vince just helped put it all together. Like Vince McMahon put it all together in his way he can. So by being made to understand that's what the world wanted, he worked with that. He may not have understood it completely, but he understood that's what the people wanted. That's all he needed to do. Because Vince's understanding of alternative culture came with Radford. No disrespect to Louis Spicolli. He rest in peace. I'm a Louis Spicolli fan, but yeah. Yeah. That's about as far as Vince went with us understanding the alternative movement. But anyway, that's going to do it for this week's episode. This is a lot of fun, actually. This one longer than last week's episode, but this just seemed to breeze by a lot quicker. So anyway, thank you all for tuning in. Again, hit the subscribe button, hit the follow, Anchor, Spotify, wherever you're listening, YouTube, hit subscribe, like, notifications bell for more new content. Sadly, however, my show, my watch-along show, due to the ongoing pandemic, sadly, a lot of people have backed out. I don't blame them. That is what it is. I hope to pick up the project again somewhere in the new year, maybe next spring. So once again, until next time, social media. I'm at Bill Chase 33, both on Twitter and Instagram. You can have me on Facebook as Bill Chase. Again, a lot of talking wrestling, especially old school wrestling. Next week's episode, we're talking about ECW December to December 2006. Oh, yes. That's right, folks. Part of being a fan is experiencing things that are not so good either. But hey, it's all part of the experience. I wouldn't trade the bad memories for anything. And bad memories of this show, oh, yeah, they're ever present, shall we say. So, yes, next week, ECW December to December 2006. So until then, this is your friend of mine, Bill Chase, quoting my fellow native Hamiltonian, the late, great Billy Red Lyons, when I tell y'all, don't you dare miss it. Thank you for listening to Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. If you'd like to make a contribution to the show, just follow him on Twitter already. He's had it for 10 years and barely even has 400 followers.